Hello and welcome to the realm of astrology. If this is your first time visiting, I would encourage you to look around the site. We have loads of goodies for both the novice and the expert astrologer. And you will be sure to find something of interest if you look at our site at www.realm-of-astrology.com. Today I'm going to do a step-by-step chart analysis. I have had a lot of comments and feedback from people indicating that they get confused when staring at a natal chart. That's understandable. There's usually a lot going on. There's a lot of symbols and aspect lines, and it can be confusing. My purpose here is to simplify and take you through a step-by-step analysis of delineating a chart the way that I would normally do it. And my method is very simple and easy, and you usually get to the bottom and the core of the personality. Today we are going to look at the chart of Steve Jobs. I'm sure you're all aware of his recent passing, and of course what a tremendous loss it is to all of us. He was a very dynamic individual, a genius, and an extremely unique person, and his chart really does highlight that. My first step when looking at a chart is to look for three indicators, and they are the sun, the moon, and the ascendant. So let's start by looking at Steve Jobs' ascendant, which is the furthermost section of the circle on the left-hand side. This point here on the left-hand side is the ascendant, and we notice that it is at 22 degrees Virgo. The ascendant is described as your outer physical appearance. It's how others see you. It's your social mask. So when I think of someone with a Virgo rising, I think of someone with a very neat and orderly appearance. There's a modesty about them. They also have a very youthful appearance because their ruling planet is Mercury. And Mercury is about youthfulness and the inner child. The good news is if you have a Virgo rising, you're going to age extremely well. Now, another thing about Virgos is that they're very health conscious, and they have their ideas about diet. I had heard a story about Steve Jobs that he was a fruitarian, which is someone who eats only fruits, and because he had such a love of apples, it's why he came to name his company Apple. Anyways, I thought that was an interesting little tidbit, and I thought that I would pass that along. But getting back to the chart, the next thing we look at, we determine that his rising sign is Virgo. So the ruler of Virgo is Mercury, and we look to see where his Mercury is. Now, we notice in the case of Steve Jobs that his Mercury, which is the little orange guy there in the corner, is in the 5th house in Aquarius. Mercury rules communications and ideas. What is Aquarius known for? Well, Aquarius is known for being a future-oriented visionary. Aquarius also rules technology, specifically computer and computer equipment. So does it make sense that his ruler is in Aquarius in the 5th house? Absolutely. The 5th house is about creativity. It's your hobbies. It's what brings you joy. We know that when he was in high school, Steve Jobs, on his own time, used to attend seminars at Hewlett-Packard. This was known as the Homebrew Computing Club. This was in the early 70s. And that's where he met his future partner, Steve Wozniak. Now, another thing that we notice is that his Mercury is exalted. What does it mean to have an exalted Mercury? It means that the energy and your thinking abilities are heightened and that it comes easily to you. So this is very much a talent. And we know that obviously he was very talented in that area. We also notice that his Mercury is retrograde. Now, contrary to belief, a retrograde Mercury does not mean that you lack the ability to think or that it's difficult for you. Usually what it means is that you're somebody that goes over the ideas in your head over and over again, like a continuous loop, and you're always revising and perfecting the plan. I would think somebody who is a hardware or software engineer, that this is in fact very much an asset to have. Now, another thing that retrograde Mercury can also mean is that your early childhood education was somehow interrupted. We know that in the case of Steve Jobs, he did have to drop out of college because his adopted parents couldn't afford it. Anyways, the next thing that I do is I tend to look to see what aspects Mercury is forming. We notice that his Mercury has one kind of very loose aspect, which is a wide sextile to his moon. It's 7 degrees, so it's not very tight, but that seems to be the only other aspect that his Mercury is making. Now, moving along, what I look at next is I look to see where the sun is. And the sun, we notice, is in Pisces in the 6th house. Now, this is very interesting because he already has a Virgo rising. So planets in the 6th house tend to reemphasize those Virgonian traits. And, you know, your sun is your ego. It's you at your best. It's what you do, what gives you joy. Now, let's see. So he has a 6th house Piscean sun. And what is it that comes to mind when we think of Piscean things? Well, we think of creativity, spirituality, altruism, and chances are that these are things that he does in his daily life. What we do know about him is that Steve Jobs was a Buddhist, and as far as his creativity and artistic part, well, he was co-founder of Pixar Animations. Film and photography is very much a Piscean thing. And from what I also understand, that when he was a student at Reed College and he dropped out, he used to drop in on a calligraphy and topography class, which is very unlike something that a computer geek would do. So I think he probably did that because he had an appreciation of design and aesthetics. And luckily for us, he implemented that design sense into the Mac. And of course, later on, other computer companies went to, copy him. But, it's a good thing that he did do this. Anyways, getting back to the Piscean sun, we notice that the only aspects that this Piscean sun is making is a semi-sextile to the moon, and it's trining his south node. So the next thing we look at is we look at the moon, and we notice that his moon is in Aries in the 7th house. The moon represents your true emotional nature and your needs. It's what you need to do to feel secure. It's what Freud would refer to as the shadow. It's how you react in stressful situations. A 7th house moon in Aries is somebody who needs partnerships. He also needs to be the top dog in the partnership. He needs to be number one. And it means that he can be a little bit selfish and a little bit arrogant. And of course, he's very driven. What we know of Steve Jobs, we also know that he was fired from his company because he gave his board of directors an ultimatum. They had to choose between him and his CEO. And of course, the directors chose his CEO. So he probably had to eat a big slice of humble pie when he did that. And I think that was very much the 7th house moon in Aries that was in play. Now, another thing that we do know about 7th house and what it represents, it usually represents your spouse or your marriage partner. And I don't know enough about Mrs. Jobs to comment on that, but I would say that a seventh house Aries moon, that she was probably, or she is probably, a very feisty woman. Now the moons are squaring the nodes, and that's a very karmic signature. It means that life won't always be easy, and it's going to deal you a couple of hard hands, and we know that's definitely the case. So those are the three indicators that I look at, and I think that they tend to sum up the personality really well. Now, to fine-tune this even further, what I do is I look for planetary configurations or signature aspects. In the case of Steve Jobs, we notice that he has a cardinal grand cross. Now, grand crosses are difficult aspects because it's 4 planets or more, as is the case with Steve Jobs, squaring and opposing each other. Squares create stress. With a cardinal grand cross, this is someone with a great deal of energy, and he wants to do everything all at once, but he doesn't know where to start. I would imagine that Steve Jobs was probably very difficult to work or live with. We notice that this grand cross falls in his 2nd, 4th, 8th, 10th, and 11th house. Now, the one positive thing that I will say about grand crosses, so anybody out there who has a grand cross, I don't want you to despair, is that if you learn to direct the energy, this is something that can give the individual a lot of drive to achieve, and the individual can go on to accomplish remarkable things. Again, this is something that you learn to direct and channel the energy as you mature. But you can go on and achieve many great, wonderful things if you do have a grand cross. And the final thing that I will look at is the lunar phase, which is determined by the distance of the moon from the sun. In the case of Steve Jobs, his moon is 32 degrees ahead of his sun, which makes him a new moon type. New moons are like Aries in their energy. They are energetic, they're good at starting things, and they have incredible drive. So the lunar phase tends to complement his Aries moon very nicely, and it tends to re-emphasize his Aryan qualities. So overall, the feel for Steve Jobs' chart is that he has a lot of cardinal and a lot of fiery energy, and he's really good at initiating projects, and he has wonderful ideas brought to us by his Aquarius Mercury. But then, there's the paradox that he has this quiet Pisces sun and Virgo ascendant. So you have these two extremes that I think really must have been quite a push-pull for him. And again, the man was a paradox, and this can be seen. Now, I would encourage everybody, if they do have the time, to watch his Stanford address on YouTube. I think that it gives us a lot of background into what the man was like. Anyways, I hope you've enjoyed this chart reading. Please visit me at www.realm-of-astrology.com. The URL is below, and thank you, and visit me again.